I do have an answer.
Ah, magic makers. So today we are diving into something that it's going to hit many of you guys right in the feels. And it's talking about radical self-possession. And no, it's not some woo-woo term. I don't do the woo-woo. And it's not some type of vision board thing that we got to put on it. It is, I'm sitting down here with Angela Burke, and she is the author of Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. And we're getting into the messy, beautiful truth about what it really means to own your damn life. And especially as we start to navigate this wild ride called midlife. We're talking about grieving the former versions of ourselves because I know some of you are still stuck with like, when I was 30, I used to be able to do whatever. Or maybe we're at the age where, oh, we might be doing this alone, either by choice or through some other situation. And why self possession might be the most badass thing you could do for yourself right now. So let's get into it. Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk.
Yeah, as I was going through this, I was like, your book hits on a lot of like those big kind of like, ooh, you see me moments. And, let's just hop right into it. What would you describe as radical self-possession?
Yep, it's a great question. And, I, like you, do not do the woo woo. I've never been that person. I'm sort of a pretty practical girl. But basically, I'll tell you what it's not, right? It's not a vibe. It's more of a declaration.
Mm,
And it is the thing that happens when we stop whispering what we want, when we
yeah.
start owning our own life, because we've paid full price for this life. And we don't owe anybody apologies or explanations. And really, when you break it down, the truth is this: many of us have played small for decades, right? And I'll speak for myself. Not because I'm weak, not because
Mm,
I'm clueless or I lacked ambition. I played small for really good reasons.
yeah.
Some of them were for my partner, when I was married. I played small for stability. I
Yeah.
I played small because it was modeled for me, and somehow I was rewarded
Yep.
for being the quiet, peaceful, content, small one, really. And so I carried a lot of responsibility to sort of keep everything floating
Yeah.
and like running, right? But there's a price that you pay for doing that for too long. And
Mm,
for me, I lost myself.
yep.
And I couldn't recognize the very best parts of me that actually made me me. And so radical midlife self-possession is when we stop doing that and we start reclaiming who we are and our place in our own life.
Yeah. Everything you said, I hear it from my clients, right? You hear that and I don't think our parents or other adults in our lives meant to model this, but you see like, oh, I'm the peacemaker. I'm the person who, makes sure dinner gets on the table. I'm the person who makes sure whatever it is happens. And you don't even realize the roles that you fall into.
Yep.
It's just because you saw that behavior as you went through your life. And I think as we get to our midlife, it could be the hormones, it could be just you've had your thousand cuts that you're just like, I can't.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree. Like, I don't think that there was ever kind of this malicious intention
Yeah.
to sort of, instruct
Mm,
women, mainly women, to sort of become, shadows of ourselves.
yeah.
And I personally don't think that I was ever personally rewarded for doing it, but it just became the way that I live my life. And,
Right.
you know, I I think the why now, there's a lot of reasons. I think number one, you hit on it, right? Like, we're losing some of the hormones that I think, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinician, but everything that I've read, there are a set of hormones that sort of keep us soft,
Yeah.
right? They sort of keep us as nurturing. I kind of like I'm inverting my like I'm hugging, right? Like, they sort of keep
Right.
you in that place. So I think that that's one reason, sort of the why now, the hormonal shifts. I think the other reason for me and for a lot of the women that I interviewed for the book and a lot of the experts that I interviewed for the book is that we're we're sort of at this moment in our lifespan because we don't have the luxury of like moving through the rest of our lives at this slow pace, right?
Mm,
Things are happening. We're more than halfway through. You hope you have a few decades left. And for me,
Right.
I just decided I do not want to live the rest of my life the way I lived the previous decades, you
Yeah.
know? And so like the freight train kind of feels like it's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and I think, you know, for me personally, it didn't show up in this like I blew up my whole life way,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You didn't
you
eat, pray,
know?
love your life. You
Correct. Correct. I mean, you know, like I would love to be able to do that, but you know, my life's a little complicated. But I do think that it is this, you know, combination of things that sort of come together where many of us are just waking up and just saying no,
Yeah.
you know? And I think one of the other, you know, kind of triggers for me, and again for a lot of the women that I interviewed for the book is, you know, there are subtle signs
Yeah.
that we're losing ourselves. And like I said, for me, I almost started feeling like I was standing at the fringe of my own life. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I didn't recognize
You're
myself.
kind of like
And I,
watching a movie and you're like, but I'm not even an actress in it.
right. I don't even have a part in this. How can it be? And so I do think that it's a lot of kind of a combination of things that are
Yeah.
happening in insofar as the why now.
You know, it's interesting. So I'm having this conversation with the woman who does my eyebrows. She's been doing my eyebrows for like 15 years. So at this
Mm-hmm.
point, we're in a domestic partnership.
Right.
And she's been with her husband since she was 20 years old.
Right.
And she's now, I think she's in her 50s. And so
Yep.
we were like just having a conversation about just the like bullshit that you put up with and the bullshit that now you're like, and she was kind of saying, like, he's been working my last nerve. And I just like, you know, the kids were coming home for the holidays, and she's like, I didn't want us to be have tension in the house, well, just over the holidays. And so she was like, I was just waiting for the holidays to be over. And she's like, now the holidays are over. And she's like, we're having this big conversation. And
Yeah.
I feel like so many women are in that point where they're like, we need to have this big conversation because I've choked down all the feelings, all the things that have be it husbands, other partners, kids, family members. You've like, I've choked it down and I can't choke it down anymore. And it's sad that it gets to the like Mount Vesuvius point.
Yeah. It's no, and it's so true, right? And I think that again, if you like don't carry a big stick, at least for me, right? Like I try not to carry a big stick when I look back at my 20s and 30s and 40s. But there are a lot of things that we do choke down. And for me, that came at you know how it what it looked like for me was I didn't speak my mind.
Right.
I sort of believed that my desires, whether they were in the bedroom, like whatever it was, like I didn't have a right to have those things come first on the list.
Right. You had
And
to go along to get along.
correct. And, you know, if I think about my marriage, one of the other things that I realized was like I was so much trying to give my three boys a happy and intact home.
Mm,
But what I failed to recognize that in my doing that, I did not show them a happy mom. I did not show them a happy Angela. And so I had to ask myself, like, you know, there were a lot of hard questions I had to ask myself, but one of them was not only what do I deserve,
right.
right? And I deserve happiness. I deserve pleasure. I deserve for those things to come first on the list. And I want my kids to know me and know
Yeah.
the best version of me, not at the expense of keeping this intact home together or family together. Do you know what I mean?
I completely know what you mean because I feel like as a woman, if you are the one who kind of makes the conversation of like, I'm unhappy, I'm this, I'm that, people look at you like, oh my God, but you're kids. And
Yeah,
that's the first
right.
thing versus you're like, but what if I'm unhappy? Like my kids should know, like I'm now modeling that like your spouse, your partner should not express their feelings. Your partner,
Totally.
your spouse should shrink around you versus we should both have, you know, more time in the sun, right? Not
Yeah.
everyone's going to be the sun. Someone's in the shade and someone's the sun, but it can't always be one person is the sun and I am the shade.
Yeah.
And I feel like when people say that, because I think about like my family, you know, I look at like when you're a kid, you don't understand the dynamics between your mother and your father. But
Right.
as you become an adult, I look back now and I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
I can. I'm first of all, I don't understand how my mom married my father. Like one, but two,
Totally. I can relate.
right? You're like you looking back now, hindsight's always 2020. You're like, I get it.
Correct.
Like I
Yeah.
and I also see how like my mom gave him multiple shots. Like
Yeah.
here's my things of needs. If you can't meet them, it's not you, it's cool. Like we
Yep.
can go our separate ways. It's not cool. And I feel like a lot of women have now given themselves permission to do that. Where
Yeah.
like, I think like I'm Gen X, and I feel that most women, our parents were the first women who said, you know what, I don't need to be married anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Where before that, like the only reason why you were divorced was someone died or
Yeah.
there was some like big
Mm-hmm.
thing or the husband just left you for the secretary. That was
Correct.
all that we saw.
Yeah.
Not that the woman said, you know what, I'm not happy anymore and I'm getting the hell out of Dodge.
Correct. I think that you're absolutely right. And I think there's two things I wanted to say to that. Number one, you know, it is this idea that, and it is this conditioning, right? That somehow our happiness is an insufficient reason to act. And that to me is such a, when you say it out loud,
If
you
you
kind
want
of
to
like,
use the F bomb, if you want to say
okay,
that's
thank you.
if
When
you
you
want to
say
say
it
that's
out
fucked
loud,
up, yes.
when you say it out loud, it's like, what the fuck does that, are we serious right now? But there's so many, so much of how the decisions that I made when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s was directly associated with that, which is
Yeah.
just fucked. And the second thing I'll say is I think the other thing that in writing the book, um, in starting my Substack, which I did, so I started writing the book last April. I started a Substack in June, and it was really just to get feedback on my writing. Like, I spent 30
Right.
years in marketing. I'm not a writer. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a coach. I'm just a girl trying to
Right.
figure this shit out. But one of the other things that I realized that I don't think I understood the magnitude of are these internal stories we tell ourselves. So it's
Mm.
not just the stories that I told myself, but it's the stories that other people wrote about me that I internalized, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it was about aging, worth, desirability, ambition. And there were a lot of these old scripts. And for me, and what I realized in writing the book was that list of stories is different for every woman,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. And these stories run so deep, right? For me, like I said, it was that somehow my happiness has to come last.
Yep.
Because if my happiness comes first, everybody else around me is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's wrong. The math doesn't math there. So like that's one myth we've got to bust. That I'm wrong. I'm somehow bad for wanting more.
Yes.
Whether it's I want more in the bedroom, whether I want more out of my life, whether I want more out of my relationship, somehow that's bad. Okay, that's a wrong story. And that I really started to tell myself I didn't deserve more.
Yeah.
And this surfaced for me in a lot of ways. It surfaced at work. It surfaced in my relationships with sex, and just the relationship that I had with myself. And I found through connecting with so many women to write this book is that we often ask ourselves the wrong question, right?
Yeah.
We ask ourselves the question when we're facing into something hard or these big decisions, why me? Why this? Why? And really, why the hell not? You
Yeah.
know, and so there's just like a little reframing there that I saw in myself.
Yeah. And I love that because I also see that, you start asking yourself different questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so most people, you start to feel like a whisper
Mm,
and you don't really know what the whisper is, but you're like,
yeah.
something's just like, I'm not, but it's not rage. And like most people
Mm-mm.
think you get to this point where it is this rage and you just kind of like, just like, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore moments.
Right.
Or it's the eat, pray, love, where you're like, I just blowing up my life.
Yeah.
Where I think most people need to understand that it's just kind of like, there's something whispering and you kind
Yes.
of have to just kind of like get quiet for a moment and kind of say like, what are you trying to say? Is it me trying to say like, you know what, I'm not content with, the bedroom, I'm not content with how I need to just be the person who does whatever you always seem to do.
Totally.
And I think for many of us it's like, how do we start to, one, listen to that whisper, but
Yeah.
two, how do you start to ask in a way
Yeah.
that doesn't make you feel like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. It's like, oh, it's always been this way, so I shouldn't ask. But it's like, but why?
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. And I think it starts with like stopping and just looking for the signs, right? And the signs for a lot of us are subtle. For me, one of the big signs that I noticed was that in the instances, whether the ask was big or small, my ability to say no came with this dissertation. Like I couldn't just, if somebody asked me to do something, I couldn't just say no. That's a fucking problem. The other thing was that I somehow felt like I wasn't deserving of rest, right? Or like my ability to ask for help was somehow this like catastrophic weakness or some failure on my part. And if I look back, again, these are not, whacks across the head. They're just like insidious and subtle little shifts. And for me, it was this idea that I started to not recognize myself in my own life. Like, and I started to question what my place was. And these are not glaring signs of like, hey, something's wrong. And it didn't happen. I didn't wake up one day with this realization, but it was over a period of time. And it wasn't until I stopped and started looking at the signs and then telling myself, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
This is not in your head. You're not alone. And you don't deserve to allow this to continue to happen. Like there's no reward for living your life on the fringes of your very own existence. Like you don't get anything. And I was suffering, right? So it was that idea of like stopping and listening, telling myself and reminding myself I wasn't alone, I wasn't crazy, and that I deserved more.
Right.
I deserved better, not for anybody else, but for me. And these things are just, they're subtle shifts in how we think and how we perceive ourselves in our own life, right? And it's not like you don't blow up your life. And I wish it happened where you just woke up one day and it's like, all the signs, but they're not. And it's just about really recognizing them.
Yeah. And, for most people, I always say like, it's, even my whole world's around health and fitness. Like health and fitness isn't this like, you wake up one day and the light switch goes on. It's a dimmer switch, right? Our lives are dimmer switches. Right. And it just kind of like gradually like the brightness increases, or on the other side, gradually the light goes out depending on, and it's just, you have to kind of know when you're going to notice it, either when you're in a complete blackout or when the lights are shining bright as possible.
Absolutely. And I also think too, like, when you stop and rest and look for those signs, and again, they're really there, right? And for me, like if I look back again, to your point, hindsight is 2020. I was more easily annoyed.
Yeah.
I was waking up feeling exhausted. I was, this idea that I couldn't just say no to something, this idea that if I look at my relationship, that I couldn't go to my partner and say, A, I'm not happy. B, something's wrong. C, I don't know what it is, but I need help. Like I didn't do any of those things.
Yeah.
Like why?
And as you're talking about this, I think so many people are afraid of what the person will say. Right.
Oh,
so like, in my mind, I make up the story. Like, if I bring this up, my partner's going to be upset. And what does that translate to? Because, I don't think most marriages have as good of communication as they think they do. And as you talk about it, it's like, well, what if I'm alone? Right. So what if I bring this up and it blows up in my face and I end up 50 something years old, single.
Alone. Yeah. Yeah. And that's an interesting one, right? Because like, if you touch on that, right? So to me, it kind of centers on this idea of grief. Grief comes up in a lot of ways, right? And so for me, it was this idea that I had, I delayed getting married. I didn't get married until I was in my, early 30s. I kind of delayed having kids. Because I didn't think I wanted those things, but fast forward, I did, and I did those things. But when we realized the marriage ended, that was a grief for me. And it wasn't just like I was grieving my marriage, but I was grieving the life that I thought I was going to live. And so this idea of grief, whether it's grieving relationships or family structures that you thought you were going to live, whether it's old identities, whether, for me, a lot of it too was like, hey, I used to be able to do fitness things with no problem. And as you get older, it's not harder to do. And so this idea that grief can come and show up in a lot of ways. For me, one of the other ones was when two of my older boys moved out. It was like, damn, the house is super quiet.
Yeah.
So this idea of grief that it doesn't just come when you lose somebody. It comes at the, when something about the story you created or the life you wanted, or the things that you used to do, you can't do anymore for whatever reason, by circumstance, by choice, whatever. And I think what happens too is that, for many of us women, it's like we navigate through this idea of grief and loss as some kind of failure. And
Yeah.
so it's like for me, and again, for a lot of the women that I talk to in the book, it's like you have to first start with acknowledging the feeling and accepting it. Right. And that's hard. I say it like, I don't mean to sound trite and like, oh, you just write it down and accept it, but start with that. And for me,
Yeah.
even this idea of like naming the feeling, that's a huge, you put a name to something and it's like, okay, it makes it real. And then I can kind of take the step. And then, grief and change is not always a failure. And
No.
that's a hard thing to kind of grapple with, right? And I think some of us fall into this trap of, okay, great, if we get to those points, that somehow, taking action requires like this perfect plan and this
Yes.
well thought out strategy and this playbook for life. And it's like, it doesn't. It just, even the smallest, tiniest action is movement toward something else. And sometimes different is just that, right? It's different. It's
Yes.
change. And many of the women that I spoke to in the book and a lot of the experts reinforce this idea that good things can come from change and they can come from the different. But it's hard. Like, I don't want to make it seem like it's this simple, like there's one recipe for it. But that's where I think some of us can kind of get locked in the stories that we tell ourselves and these things that we used to do or used to have or used to look like or imagined would be our future, and change becomes the failure. And that's hard.
And I think you just nailed it. It's that expectation factor. All right. So it's like, we all grew up in the fairy tale land. Like you get
Yep.
married, you have kids,
Mm-hmm.
and we never kind of take it past the marriage and have kids. We never take
Mm-hmm.
it to the like, okay, 18 years later, they're going to go off and go to college, and then they might not be going to college down the street. Then
Yeah.
after 4 years of college, they might be like, hey, I'm moving to Kalamazoo, and you don't live in Kalamazoo. And so like, what happens then? And then it's like, well, this guy I kind of liked in my 20s. Am I going to like him 30 years later? Like, what are we going to talk
Yeah.
about when we're not going, hey, who's bringing so and so to soccer?
Right.
And then it's like, then it's like, then midlife happens and you're like,
Yeah.
no one told me about this shit.
God. No doubt. Like that, you're absolutely right. And the more women that I talk to, this, especially a lot of us who got married young and stayed in these relationships, who are now waking up in their 50s with their partners going, hey, this is not where I want to spend the rest of my life. And it's,
Right.
and that's not what the generation of women who came before us, I don't think that was always the experience. Because if I look back, some women made the brave choice, certainly to divorce and leave, bad relationships or bad situations for sure. But it's happening now more and more. And I think it is because, you know, we're getting to this idea that we just like talk about the hormonal shifts and all the craziness of midlife and postmenopause and menopause and perimenopause and whatever. Like that's a whole, I think, podcast in and of itself. But it's like you know for me, I carried a lot of guilt and shame, I think, with this idea that I sort of delayed a choice to get married, and I somehow was supposed to just know better and be more settled
Yes.
in myself. And like, I delayed it. And some of my friends didn't. They got married in their 20s and started having kids really early. And so I think I carried a lot of guilt and shame and embarrassment, if I'm
Yeah.
honest with you, that somehow in my quest to make these really good choices, I fucked up.
Yep.
And it took me a while to kind of release that guilt and shame, I think. And because those feelings and those emotions are really powerful. They keep us stuck, I think.
Yeah. And I love the fact about the grief, because I think most people, we're used to just grieving death, right?
Yes.
Someone dies, and it's okay to feel sad. It's okay
Yeah.
that that piece of your life is missing.
Yeah.
And even if you were the one who raised your hand and said, I want out of this relationship, if your children went off to Kalamazoo,
Mhm.
it's okay to feel like, you know what? This is a change. And for so many of us, we can like roll with the punches.
Mm.
And for a lot of us who can't roll with the punches, it's, you're like, you look at it as weakness. Like,
Oh yeah.
why can't I be like, my kid moved to Kalamazoo. I should be happy that they didn't move back in. Like,
Yeah.
yet you're like, it's just a piece of a dynamic. Like this person
Yeah.
has been a part of your life for 18 years. And now they're
Yeah.
like,
Adios. Yeah, it's so true. And I do think that there's fear, there's shame, there's sadness.
yeah,
And for me, I think, and for a lot of the women that I talk to, it's almost like we don't give ourselves permission to sit with the quiet and name the
yes,
thing that's happening, name the feeling, put a label on the thing that's happening, and then move past the it must be me. I must be the only one. Because if I'm honest with you, if I go back, I actually had this book idea when I was in my 30s, and it
mm,
was going to be called The Real Girl's Guide to Over 35, because that was a period where I was super struggling. I
yeah,
was newly married. I had two small kids. I was at this kind of career pivot point. My appearance was changing. My hormones at that time, perimenopause wasn't even a word that I knew
no,
back then, but my cycles were shifting. I was like trying to have a third kid and it wasn't working. So all these things were happening. And I was looking around and I'm like, everybody seems to have their shit together. It's got to just be me. So the folder that I started at 35 for this book literally and figuratively got buried until last December when I found the fucking folder. That's what started this whole thing. And I opened the folder and I was like, well, look at this. A lot of the same topics that I was struggling with them, I'm still struggling with now. And I think what's changing, and I think a lot of the women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are going to benefit from the conversations that we're having. And we are going to benefit from the women who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s who now can look back and go, y'all keep with it because there's a payoff here. There's a draft because the conversations are changing. So we're
yes,
moving much faster through the process of it's got to just be me. I'm the crazy one. Why would I walk away from this marriage? Why would I walk away from this family which seemingly is everything that anybody would want?
right,
We're labeling the things our dissatisfaction. We're giving ourselves the permission to act. We're making changes, big, small, it doesn't matter. We're taking up space in our own life. We are radically possessing our own lives. And now, some of us are going, okay, now what? And the
right,
fact is we're talking
yeah,
and we're taking action. Small steps, big steps. And what's been interesting is in writing this book, I've connected with women who are in their 70s and 80s. One, this amazing 80-year-old woman who is like my angel. She I'll fast forward through the story. She was married for a long time, divorced, married again, to the love of her life. Seemingly, he got sick with cancer.
oh,
She lost him when she was in her late 70s. She grieved. She wrote a book at 80 about grief. Here's an 80-year-old woman, not an author, wrote a book. She found love again at 82. And so I
wow,
interviewed for the book, and one of the last questions was, I said, what was the most surprising thing about finding love at 82? She's basically that the parts still work and I like it. So here she is, this beacon of a lot of shit happened in her life. A lot of shit she put up with, a
yeah,
lot of shit that happened to her, a lot of shit that happened because of her. And here she is at 82. The parts still work and I like it. And so to me, it's this, yeah, like I still every day I'm fucking baffled. The new thing I'm grappling with is my hair loss. Hair's growing, hair's
yes,
falling out. What the actual? But the fact is, we're having these conversations and we're taking small steps. And they start with acknowledging, sitting with the emotion, naming the emotion, and then deciding, no, nope, I'm
yeah.
not doing this anymore.
And and I feel like also, social media has closed the gap for many of us
Totally.
because like if you think about like your immediate circle of friends,
Yep.
like you're not sitting there, maybe someone's like, oh my God, my husband is the best one since sliced bread and my
Mm,
children are this. And then meanwhile, you're sitting there at coffee and being like, I feel like a hot freaking mess
yeah.
and I want to kill my kids. And so
Yeah.
like, and if you admitted that out loud and
Oh,
your immediate friend group was like, what do you mean you hate your spouse? What do you mean you hate your kids? You
oh,
would feel like
totally.
something's wrong with me. Where I can
Totally.
post that on any social media platform and someone's going to be like, same girl,
Oh,
same.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Well, and
feel,
I totally agree with you. And I think that this is also the thing that I noticed, right? So if I go back 3 or 4 years, my friends and I were not talking. about
No.
menopause, hormone shifts, dry vaginas, lack of
Right.
libido. We weren't talking about anything. And it really, what I've noticed, because I asked myself, why didn't we talk about that? And I think it was for the things that you said, because if we're feeling it, somehow we're going to be judged. And I think in a lot of ways, I was my own worst judge. But like putting that aside, we're going to be judged. And then we're going to be graded on like, is it right? Is it wrong? And who wants to be wrong all the time? Like, I don't want to be wrong. And so what I noticed was when I started writing this book and started interviewing women, there was a little bit of like the law of attraction. And once I started talking, it's like the people around me started talking.
Yeah.
And then like you pay attention, right? Like I love the fact that so many more doctors and women are talking about menopause and symptoms and all the changes and all the solutions that we could do. That's amazing. I love the fact that more celebrities are doing that, which is great. But like, I'm not a celebrity. I'm
All
not
right.
Halle Berry. I'm not Naomi Watts. I'm just a real girl trying to figure this shit out. But there is a little bit of this law of attraction. Social media plays a huge part in it. But the more we get honest and start talking, people like start to open up and the conversations change. So the fact that I can now sit with my group of girlfriends, who many of whom I've known since like second grade, and I could talk about my dry vagina. I could talk about what lube is working. I can talk about the fact that, fuck, my libido has just changed. Like, I don't want it to be like this. I
Right.
want to be like my Diane at 82 saying the parts still work and I like it. So like, even just the fact that I could have these conversations, so different, right? My
Yeah.
mom couldn't do that.
Yeah. You didn't sit around. I had a woman on the podcast talking about pelvic floor.
Oh,
And no one talked about like sex hurts.
no,
Like no one
no,
sits around and it says that over brunch, right?
no.
And so now, the conversations are now more open, and now you don't
Yes,
feel like I'm the only person who experiences all of these random things.
totally.
And or if you do say it, someone's like, "Oh, I gotta add that to the
Judgy,
list.
yeah,
I gotta
judgy,
add that to the
yeah,
list to look for."
yeah. And and that's the thing, right? You don't get the judgy McJudgy responses. Now it's like, oh shit, thanks for telling me. I'm going to add this to the list. And guess what? I'm going to see this and I'm going to raise you two things that I've just noticed.
Right. And so
You know?
and I'm grateful for it because I went through early menopause,
Yeah,
and
same.
so all of a sudden I'm thinking like I am dying because
Exactly.
you know back when we were going through the birds and the beats talk, all you heard about was hot flashes, and then you
Hmm.
weren't going to get your period anymore. The end.
Totally.
And
And
so all these random things are happening to me, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, it's
yeah,
not hot flashes. I'm like, my hair's falling out.
yes,
I can't sleep. Like I like all these things, and I'm
yeah,
like, clearly I'm
I'm
dying.
dying. No, I totally agree with you. And like you, I went through a lot of this stuff early. I'm now going through a new wave. So just so you know, I was under the impression of, you stopped your period, you get to turn in your card, and then it's over and done with. It's not.
No.
And the only thing I remember, so if I go back, because I'm 19 years younger than my mom and I are incredibly close. I was very close to her mom, my grandma. Nobody talked about jack shit. The
No.
only thing I remember hearing was the change. Do you remember that phrase, the
Yes,
change?
the change.
And the way they kind of described it, or maybe it was my like absorption of it, was like you literally wake up one morning and your period stopped. And so then
Yes.
your life just changes. Like that's you're changed over, like the change is like flipped
Right.
over.
We've turned the page. Moving
We've turned the
on.
page. So cool. So you're right. And there were periods where in my late 30s, in my kind of early 40s, where a lot of these things were happening to me. And you take the physical changes, the hormonal changes. And for me at that time, I was adding on the ending of a marriage, right? And I was working, my career was at a peak at that point. I was working so hard, I was exhausted. I was, I'm a big fitness gal. I love to run, I love fitness. And I found myself kind of trying to find aspects of my life that I could control. Everything else felt out of control. So I was running like a crazy woman. I'm trying to keep my boys stable. And I'm ragey at my kids. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking around and I'm looking at my friends who all seemingly have their shit together. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think I'm losing I must be having a nervous breakdown.
Right.
And I look back at that time and I wasn't. And I wish somebody asked me this the other day, like, is there something that you wish you could have told yourself at that point, in your 30s and 40s? And there are a few things that I wish I could have told myself. I wish that I would have been able to understand that midlife is not a crisis,
Yep.
that I was never falling apart. You know, I was finally, I was just changing. And I wish I would have known that I wasn't the only one. Because I think it would have made me feel less alone. And it probably would have given me the courage to take action. Small steps,
Yeah.
even small steps, which could have been saying no to more things, saying enough to more things, talking about what I wanted and how I wanted it. It could have changed things for me. And I wish I would have known that back then.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wish that it was kind of like, now like, hey, there's about 500 different things that you potentially are going to experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's gonna like you're gonna have ups and downs. Like you're gonna have like
Yeah.
amazing days, and then you're gonna have low
Yep.
days. But it's
Yeah.
like knowing that like that's how it's gonna be, and then it's kind of like being like, then it's gonna kind of peter out, but you're still gonna feel that even though you've no longer have your period. And
Yeah.
no one ever explained it that way. And
No.
when I have a client who is literally in the midst of like perimenopause, and her doctor's like, oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I'm like, girl, you're 44 years old. Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
Hell yeah, it
My
is.
I'm like, yeah, everything you described, and like I sent her a checklist. I go, follow this list, and I go, please make sure you share this with your doctor because
Yeah,
they need to be informed because like you're in the throes of it, and right
totally.
now you're now still like you went to this appointment thinking like, oh my God, I'm gonna get an answer.
Yeah. And then you get nothing. You get the shoulder shrug, like,
Right. I
mm.
don't know. Call me in 6 months. Like I've waited 6 months for this goddamn appointment. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Or worse, like, I talked to a woman recently who was like, again, kind of in her early 40s, these things are changing. She goes to her doctor, wants to put her on Prozac. I'm like, hold
yeah,
the phone. Like, maybe you need that, but like, is that really the first place we're going right now? And for me, I had almost an inverted experience because I started early. And if I go back to my 20s, I had a non-reproductive cancer when I was in my late 20s. And, then I, had kids when I was in my 30s. My mom didn't take hormones. So it was just a non-issue for me. Like it was a non-starter. We just didn't talk about it. I didn't do it. So I was like, 37 when I noticed things changing. Then my period stopped at 47 completely. So I thought I was done. Turns out I'm not. Like I've had these new waves. So about 6 months ago, I noticed low libido. My hair was falling out. My bladder was out of control. Every orifice in my body was
mm,
dry. Hot flashes came back. So I go to my OB, who I had for 25 years. I said, hey, I'm struggling right now. And she's like, yeah, that really sucks, huh? And I'm like, whoa, that's insufficient.
right. That's all
I
you can
don't need
say.
I don't need your shoulder shrug and your like, sympathetic nod. I asked two things. I said, number one, can we do blood work? Because just maybe my period stopped at 47 for another reason. She's like, your insurance won't pay for it. I said, I don't care. I'll pay for it. Then I said, and wouldn't it be great to do blood work now to see maybe where I was when we did blood work at 47 when my period did stop? She said, we never did blood work. Then I'm thinking to myself, you mean to tell me, like, was I supposed to know that? Was I supposed to know to ask at 47?
Right.
I didn't have a checklist of levels and hormone things that I should be checking on the regs. I didn't know that. And now I'm coming to you, and the best you can offer me is a shoulder shrug. So I fired my doctor,
Yep.
went to a new doctor because I said, I am not. This is unacceptable to me. Went to a new doctor, just started on some low dose hormones about a month ago, and I'm feeling fucking better.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not the answer for everybody. And jury's still out. Like, I'm taking a very cautious approach here, but I finally found a doctor who was willing to listen to me.
Yeah.
She didn't offer to put me on the fucking birth control pill at 55. She
Right.
didn't tell me I needed Prozac. She said, we're going to find a solution for you. And
Yeah.
that's what we have to do, right? And it's annoying. So it's so maddening to me that on top of the injustices of midlife, on top of all the changes we navigate for decades of our life, we now have to educate ourselves and demand care if we're not being given. And it's like, yep, and we have to do it. And you don't take no for an answer. And don't let your doctor gaslight you. And, and it's
Sure.
these small steps that are I think, can make the rest of our lives a little bit better.
Yeah. And it's like and everything you just said, it's like really like noticing things and then
Totally.
speaking up. It's like don't just like let it just kind of go into the closet and then eventually you open the closet and everything falls out on in your face. Um,
Totally.
and being owning our lives, and if we don't own our lives, no one is going to, no one's going to like ring your doorbell and say, okay girl, now's the time to
No,
start owning
no,
owning your life, because it just doesn't happen that way. And
nope.
I'm really grateful that you have written this book. And so I do like about three like quick quick answers, like it was more like a
Absolutely.
or a yes or no. So,
Okay.
do you still people please sometimes?
Yes.
Have you regretted any major life decisions?
I I don't know that I try not to live with a lot of regret because I think every decision that I made sort of has informed the next set of decisions. I just wish I would have said no and enough sooner in a lot of parts of my life.
Perfect. And do you believe women get better with age?
Oh, fuck yeah, I do.
Absolutely. And so I ask, my VA, she just turned 40, and she
Yeah.
goes, Kim, she goes, can I ask you a question? I'm like, yeah, sure. What do you got? And she's like, she goes, when you turned 40, did you just stop giving a shit? And I go, oh girl, that happened before that. However, it definitely stuck when I when
Oh
I
yeah,
when I turned 40. So I'm like, yeah, I think we all just kind of get to that point where like the things we just used to just like let go, you just can't let go anymore.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love it.
And I ask, where can people find you on the socials?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram, Real Girls Guide 55. My website is realgirlsguide.com. All the information about my book, Real Girls Guide to Midlife, which you can find on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, where you love your books, is available now. Also, I'm on Substack, Real Girls Guide to Midlife. I write about 3 times a week. It's super fun for me. So please, I would love to connect with you and all your listeners. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. And I ask everyone, what's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Saying no without an essay.
Yes, 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 yes. There's a woman, Lisa Nichols, and she was the first person that I had ever heard talk about saying no is a complete sentence. And ever since she said that, like every time I find myself saying no, like if you ask me something, hey Kim, blah blah, no, and then I would be like, well, and I'm like, hey,
Oh,
sorry, conflict, and then walk away. You don't even know what my
walk away.
conflict. You don't even know what my conflict is.
Nope.
Just no conflict. The end.
Conflict. I'm not available. 3 words.
Right.
Nope.
And, I was like, I'm like, I would like to just write back no, but I
Yeah.
was like, have some social foreplay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Social foreplay.
So instead of saying, sorry, I have a conflict, it's like, no, comma, have a conflict. The
Yep.
end.
That and I think the other thing you just said is apologizing.
Yeah.
I don't I don't owe the world an apology. I don't owe the world a lot. So I used to be kind of a sorry kind of gal. Like I would apologize. Nope, I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. So I would normally put like, oh, so sorry, I
So
can't make
sorry.
it. And
Gosh, I'm
I
so sorry.
took out the so sorry. It's like, hey, no, comma, I have a conflict. Good
Yeah.
luck.
Yeah. Yep.
But this has been such a great conversation.
Uh-huh.
And Magic Makers, like, we went so many different, like I had questions that we didn't even touch, but this is like, you don't have to have it all figured out, right? This is
Nope.
like figuring yourself out and showing up exactly who you are, where you are right now. And again, listen to the whispers. I know I've talked to this about when it comes to like body parts aching. Like if you can't hear your body or your intuition whisper, you're never going to hear it when it screams at you. So
Mm-mm.
if you are really thinking like, I need to start to kind of get a little bit more inner work here, grab the Real Girl's Guide to Midlife. I will put all the links in the show notes, because if this conversation stirred up something, reach out to her. She can definitely steer you in the right direction, and I love hearing from you. So definitely if this hit you in the feels, raise your hand, screenshot it and let us know. And until next week, my loves, stay strong, stay real, and remember, you are the main character in your own damn life. All right, I will talk to you next week. Thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thank you.